My name is Cora Sterling, and I am 28 years old. I built my company, Lyra Innovations, not from a cramped dorm room, but from the quiet, persistent hum of a server rack I kept in a closet, a sound that became the anthem of my early 20s. Everyone told me to be more practical, to find a secure path, but the path I saw was one I had to pave myself. Today, sitting in the warm California sun, waiting for my name to be called at my Stanford graduation, I watched my family find their seats. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a message from my father, a short string of words that managed to pierce through years of cultivated resilience. But what happened next didn't just change everything, it recalibrated the entire universe of my past, present, and future. 5 years of deferred dreams, of whispered doubts, of choosing code over sleep, had all funneled into this single, sun-drenched morning. The first buzz of my phone in my pocket felt like a familiar pang of disappointment. The second, a few minutes later, felt like the tectonic plates of my life shifting into their final, rightful place. If you are reading this now, perhaps in a quiet moment of your own, I invite you to settle in. This isn't a story about revenge, it's a story about reclamation. It's about the quiet, steady work of building a life on your own terms, and the unexpected peace that comes when you finally stop waiting for the applause of those who were never meant to be in your audience. Growing up as the only daughter in the Sterling household, in the misty, pine-scented air of Astoria, Oregon, was to understand from a young age that the world was divided into two distinct realms. There was the world of men of timber, of sawdust, of gruff handshakes and loud machinery, and there was the world of women off warm kitchens, of neatly organized social calendars, of quiet, unwavering support for the world of men. My father, Arthur Sterling, was the sun around which our family orbited. He had inherited a small lumber mill and, through sheer force of will and an almost primal understanding of the timber industry, had built Sterling and Sons Lumber into a regional powerhouse. He was a man carved from the very Douglas firs he felled, tall, unyielding, and deeply rooted in tradition. For him, tradition meant his two sons, my older brothers Julian and Marcus, would one day take the reins. From my earliest memories, I see them trailing him through the lumber yard, their small hands touching the rough bark of logs, their ears ringing with the scream of the saws. He taught them the language of board feet and profit margins, the art of negotiating with logging crews and managing freight schedules. When I was 9, clutching a book on basic programming I'd found at the library, I asked if I could go with them. My father looked down at me, a genuine smile softening his rugged features. "Now, Cora," he said, using the pet name I'd long since outgrown, "why would you want to get sawdust in your hair? This is dirty, boring work. Your mother is baking her famous apple pie. Why don't you go give her a hand?" My mother, Helen, was a watercolor painting in a world of oil and acrylics. She was gentle, her love a soft, constant presence in our home. She hosted flawless dinners for my father's business associates, her grace a quiet asset to his gruff charisma. In the privacy of the kitchen, she'd sometimes see me hunched over the family's desktop computer and whisper, "That's wonderful, dear. You're so clever." But it was always followed by a cautious glance toward the door. "Just maybe not while your father's home. He worries." She loved me, I never doubted that. But she had made her peace with the architecture of our family, and she expected me to find my own comfortable room within it. Despite the gentle redirection, my aptitude for logic and systems was undeniable. In 5th grade, I won a regional mathematics competition. My father drove me to the award ceremony, and on the way home, he patted my knee and said, "It's good you have a little hobby, Cora. Keeps your mind sharp." When my 8th grade science teacher called home to rave about a program I'd written to organize the school's library catalog, suggesting I be placed in advanced computer science classes at the high school, my father thanked him politely. The subject was never mentioned again. In high school, while Julian and Marcus received sturdy pickup trucks for their 16th birthdays, practical tools for their future at the company, I received a laptop. My father deemed it a sensible tool for schoolwork. He had no idea that on that very laptop, in the quiet hours after midnight, I began to sketch out the foundational algorithms for what would one day become Lyra Innovations, a company specializing in AI-driven encryption for sustainable energy grids. When it came time for college applications, the chasm between my world and my father's became impossible to ignore. I applied to Stanford's engineering program without telling him, my guidance counselor my only confidant. When the thick acceptance packet arrived, my mother's joy was immediate and pure, but it was quickly shadowed by a flicker of fear. At dinner that night, I announced my news. The clatter of forks on plates ceased. Julian and Marcus exchanged a look. My father slowly placed his knife and fork on his plate, perfectly aligned. "Stanford," he said, his voice a low rumble. "In California? What in God's name for?" "Their computer science and engineering school is one of the best in the world," I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. He scoffed, a sound that echoed with years of dismissal. "Engineering isn't for you, Cora. It's a tough, competitive world. You'll get discouraged." "And for what? To play with computers? That's not a real business. Real business is tangible. You can touch it, weigh it, ship it." "I won't get discouraged," I promised, my jaw tight. After weeks of tense silence and my mother's quiet diplomacy, he finally relented, but with conditions that felt more like a leash than a lifeline. He would pay for my first year of tuition, and only the first. I had to maintain a perfect 4.0 GPA. I had to work a part-time job to cover all my living expenses. And I had to call home every Sunday to report my progress. "1 year," he declared, his index finger tapping the table for emphasis. "We'll see if this digital fantasy of yours is worth the investment. After that, you're on your own." The night before I flew to Palo Alto, my mother came to my room. She sat on the edge of my bed, her hands twisting a handkerchief in her lap. "Your father, he just wants to protect you," she said softly. "He's afraid you'll be disappointed." "He doesn't believe in me," I replied, closing a suitcase filled with clothes that suddenly felt too provincial for California. "He doesn't understand you," she corrected. "There's a difference. Maybe someday you can show him." I zipped the suitcase with a final, decisive pull. "I will, Mom. I promise." As I walked toward the security gate at the Portland airport the next morning, my father's parting words were delivered with the weight of a final judgment. "When this all falls through, there's always a place for you in the accounting office at Sterling and Sons." Staring out the airplane window as the green, timber-covered hills of Oregon dissolved into clouds, I made a silent vow. I would never set foot in that accounting office. I would build something of my own, something so real, so tangible in its success, that even Arthur Sterling would have to see it. I just had no idea how much of myself I would have to build along with it. Stanford was like stepping into a different atmosphere. The air itself seemed to crackle with intellectual energy. For the first time, no one found it odd that I, a young woman, was passionate about systems architecture and cryptography. The only question was whether my ideas were any good. The workload was a tidal wave. I took a full slate of engineering and business courses and worked 25 hours a week at a campus coffee shop, the smell of burnt espresso clinging to my clothes. My roommate, a vibrant art history major named Zoe, joked that she only knew what I looked like from photos. I'd stumble in from my late shift, study until my vision blurred, and wake up with the imprint of a keyboard on my cheek. "You're going to vaporize," Zoe warned one night, finding me asleep on a stack of textbooks. "Can't afford to," I mumbled, splashing my face with water from a bottle. "My dad's funding has a 1-year expiration date. After that, it's scholarships or bust." I was exhausted, but I was also alive in a way I'd never been before. At midterms, I earned the top mark in my advanced algorithms course, which caught the attention of Professor Lena Petrova. She was a legend in the computer science department, a woman with a mind like a diamond and a reputation for not suffering fools. "Sterling," she called out as I was packing my bag after a lecture. She held up my exam paper. "This solution you proposed for the grid optimization problem, it's elegant. Have you considered its application in securing decentralized energy networks?" I hadn't. I had been so focused on the theoretical problem, on surviving the semester, that I hadn't looked up to see the horizon. But she had. The renewable energy sector is pouring billions into infrastructure, she said, her eyes intense. But their security protocols are a decade behind. They're building glass houses on a digital fault line. Your approach it could be the foundation for something much stronger. Come to my office hours. Let's talk. Those office hours were the seed. Professor Petrova didn't just mentor me, she challenged me, pushing me to refine my algorithms, to think not just like a student, but like an innovator. She introduced me to a small group of other students who shared my obsessive drive. There was Rafael, a coding prodigy from Brazil who could make a server sing, Sophie, a design student with an uncanny intuition for user experience, and Leo, a business major who could translate our technical jargon into compelling narratives. We started meeting in a small, stuffy study room in the engineering library on Sunday afternoons. Our idea, which we christened Lyra Innovations, was simple in concept but immensely complex in execution, an AI-driven encryption platform for sustainable energy grids that could learn, adapt, and self-heal in real time. Most security is a static wall, I explained, sketching on a whiteboard. We can build a dynamic immune system. My father's perfunctory Sunday calls continued. Grades, he'd ask. All A's, I'd reply. Job. Still there. Picking up extra shifts. Good. Have you given any thought to what you'll do when the year is up? I never mentioned Lyra. I knew what he would say. It would be another flight of fancy, more time wasted in my digital fantasy. By the spring of my freshman year, we had a working prototype. Professor Petrova urged us to enter Stanford's annual Entrepreneurship Challenge, which offered a grand prize of $75,000 in seed funding. We're not ready, I protested. The UI is still clunky. You're never fully ready, she countered. The market doesn't wait for perfection. Get in the arena. The night before our final pitch, I called my mother. I have a chance to win some funding tomorrow, I said, trying to sound casual. For a business idea. Oh, Cora, that's marvelous, she said. What kind of business? I explained it as best I could. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, your father always says that the best businesses solve the biggest problems. It sounds like you've found a very big one. Do you think he'd be proud? The question slipped out, small and vulnerable. There was a pause, filled with the static of the long-distance line and 1,000 unspoken things. I think, she said carefully, he would be surprised. But one day, Cora, he will be proud. I already am. The next day, we won. The photo of our team, four sleep-deprived but ecstatic students holding an oversized check, ran on the university's website. I emailed the link to my parents. My father's reply came a few hours later, a single, terse line. I see you're enjoying the university's play money. Focus on your finals. That summer, I didn't go home to Oregon. I stayed in Palo Alto. The prize money allowed us to rent a small, windowless office above a laundromat and pay ourselves just enough for rent and ramen noodles. I called my father to let him know I'd secured a full academic scholarship for my sophomore year and wouldn't need his financial support. So, you're committed to this little venture, then, he said, a note of resignation in his voice. Yes, I said. Businesses need paying customers, Cora. Not just prize money. Who's buying this program of yours? I had no answer. We had a great idea, a working prototype, and $75,000. But we didn't have a single customer. That's what I thought, he said, and the line went quiet for a moment. Well, good luck with your scholarship. At least you're not wasting my money anymore. I hung up the phone, the dial tone a flat, empty sound. I looked at my team, huddled around a whiteboard, arguing passionately about encryption keys. My father saw a waste of time. I saw the future. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I would have to build it without him. The sophomore year was a crucible. I cut my course load to part-time, pouring every spare ounce of energy into Lyra. We worked 18-hour days, fueled by cheap coffee and a shared, desperate belief in what we were building. The rejections were brutal. We pitched to dozens of small energy co-ops and regional utility companies. It's an interesting concept, a VP at one company told us, but you're a bunch of college kids. Our security is mission critical. We can't risk it on an unproven technology from an unproven team. We have to stop looking like students, I declared after the 15th no. We used a chunk of our remaining prize money to hire a freelance designer to create a professional brand identity. We bought suits we couldn't afford for pitch meetings. We rehearsed our presentation until we could do it in our sleep. Finally, we got a yes. It came from a small, innovative solar energy co-op in the Central Valley, run by a woman who'd started her own company and was willing to take a chance on us. The day their first payment of $15,000 cleared, I took the team out for pizza and beer. As we raised our glasses in that noisy, crowded restaurant, I thought about calling my father. But I didn't. I wanted the proof to be irrefutable. One client wasn't enough. That first client led to 3 more. And by the end of sophomore year, Lyra was generating enough revenue to hire 2 junior developers and move into a slightly larger office, one that actually had a window. I wasn't just a student anymore. I was a CEO. But early success is a fragile thing. The summer after sophomore year brought our first real crisis. One of our clients, the solar co-op that had given us our first break, suffered a significant data breach. It wasn't a flaw in our software. Their own network administrator had misconfigured a firewall, ignoring our explicit installation guidelines. But in the frantic aftermath, they pointed the finger at us. The story, framed as Stanford startup software fails, exposes customer data, was picked up by a local tech blog. They're threatening to sue, Leo said, his face pale during an emergency all-nighter at our office. A lawsuit would wipe us out. We only have enough cash runway for another 3 months. I felt a cold knot of dread in my stomach. I hadn't slept in 2 days, trying to help them trace the breach while simultaneously defending our reputation. We needed a lawyer, which meant we needed money we didn't have. We needed an investor. The next few weeks were a blur of humiliating pitches on Sand Hill Road. The venture capitalists, almost exclusively men in expensive, casual wear, listened with polite skepticism. The feedback was depressingly consistent. The tech is promising, but the team is too green. Come back when you have a seasoned CEO. Have you considered bringing on an older, male co-founder? It would lend you some credibility in the infrastructure space. After one particularly soul-crushing meeting, I sat on a bench in a perfectly manicured corporate park and called my mother, something I only did when I felt my composure starting to crack. Maybe Dad was right, I whispered into the phone. Maybe I'm just not cut out for this. Arthur Sterling sees the world in board feet, she said, her voice surprisingly firm. You see it in lines of code that can change the world. Don't you dare let his world shrink yours. Her words were the steel I needed in my spine. The next day, I had a meeting with Diana Velez of Pinnacle Ventures, one of the few women-led VC firms in the Valley. I walked in, sleep-deprived and braced for another rejection. Diana, sharp and impeccably dressed, listened to my entire pitch without interruption. She then asked a series of deeply technical questions that showed she'd not only read our deck, but understood our core technology. She leaned forward, her gaze direct. You remind me of me, 25 years ago, she said. Brilliant, driven, and perpetually underestimated. I'm going to invest $1.5 million for a 10% stake. And I'm going to connect you with the best tech lawyer in my network. Tears of relief pricked my eyes. But you have to promise me something, Cora, she continued, her voice softening. When you succeed and you will remember what this feels like. And you will find the next young woman with a brilliant idea who is being told she's too green, and you will help her. I promise, I said, and a new kind of vow settled over the one I'd made on the plane years ago. With Diana's investment and legal counsel, we weathered the storm. We proved the breach wasn't our fault and helped the client repair their systems, turning a potential lawsuit into a case study on comprehensive security. The experience forced us to mature, to create rigorous onboarding protocols and client-facing documentation. By the end of my junior year, Lyra Innovations had 20 employees in a converted warehouse in Mountain View. We were generating consistent revenue, though still reinvesting every dollar into growth. The pressure was immense. These people were trusting me with their careers, their mortgages. The weight of it settled in my body, causing migraines and a persistent insomnia that no amount of coffee could fix. My academic advisor gently suggested I needed to choose the company or the degree. I chose the company, but stubbornly remained enrolled part-time. I would not be a dropout. That was a narrative I refused to hand to my father. Our big breakthrough came in the fall of my senior year, my 5th year at Stanford. Our team had an innovation in our AI-driven threat detection that was years ahead of the competition. When we rolled it out, our client list exploded from regional players to national utility companies. Our monthly recurring revenue quadrupled in 90 days. We had to hire rapidly, bringing on experienced executives who commanded salaries that made my hands sweat. One of them was Grace Tanaka, a seasoned CFO in her early 50s who had guided 2 other startups to successful acquisitions. "You have lightning in a bottle here, Cora," she told me during her first week. "But you're growing so fast the bottle is starting to crack. Let me help you build a sustainable business, not just a rocket ship." Under Grace's guidance, we stabilized our finances and began planning for the long term. For the first time, I had a leadership team I could lean on. When we landed our first contract with a major national power provider, a 9-figure deal over 5 years, I finally felt I had news my father couldn't dismiss. "Dad," I said, calling him from my office, the city lights of Silicon Valley glittering below. "Lyra just signed a $100 million contract with a national utility." There was a long pause on the line. "That's a lot of money," he finally acknowledged. "But these tech contracts can be fickle. Are you profitable yet?" We weren't. We were in a high-growth phase. "Not yet," I admitted. "We're reinvesting everything into scaling." "I thought so," he said, and I could hear the familiar satisfaction in his voice. "Well, don't let it distract you from finishing that degree. You'll need something to fall back on when the bubble bursts." I hung up, the familiar cold disappointment washing over me. Later that night, Grace found me staring at a spreadsheet, my shoulders slumped. "He still doesn't get it, does he?" she asked gently. She must have overheard the call. I shook my head. "He never will." "My father was the same," she said, surprising me. "He owned a successful chain of hardware stores. He couldn't understand why I'd want to work in the paper-shuffling world of finance. He never once visited my office at Goldman Sachs." "How did you deal with it?" I asked. She smiled a wry, knowing smile. "I stopped trying to earn his approval and started demanding his respect. They're not the same thing, Cora. You might never get the first, but you can build a life and a career so undeniable that the second becomes unavoidable." I took her words to heart. I would stop chasing my father's pride. From now on, I would focus on building something that commanded respect. The 18 months that followed were a blur of exponential growth. Lyra expanded from 20 employees to over 150. We moved into a sleek, glass-walled headquarters in Palo Alto, our company logo a subtle, elegant script on the front doors. Walking into that building each morning was a cocktail of exhilaration and terror. Grace proved indispensable. "We need to raise a proper Series A," she advised one evening, pointing to our burn rate. "To sustain this trajectory, we need serious capital." This time, when we went out to raise money, we weren't students with a concept. We were a proven company with a 9-figure contract and a roster of major clients. Diana Velez from Pinnacle Ventures led the round, bringing in several other top-tier firms. We raised $25 million at a valuation of $400 million. The tech press took notice. A feature in a major tech journal was titled, "Lyra's Ascent, the woman-led startup securing America's power grid." My mother sent me a framed copy of the article. "So incredibly proud," her note read. My father said nothing, but my brother Julian called. "Dad saw the article," he said. "He asked me if a company that doesn't make a profit can really be worth that much money." "What did you tell him?" I asked. "I told him it's a different world now, Dad. and Cora seems to know how to navigate it. My relationship with my brothers had begun to shift. They were both at Sterling and Sons, following the path laid out for them. But I could hear a new note in their voices, not envy, but a kind of bewildered respect. With the new funding, we accelerated our R&D and began exploring international markets. The personal cost was high. I hadn't taken a real vacation in years. My social life was non-existent. You have to build a team you can trust, and then you have to actually trust them, Grace admonished, finding me at my desk at 3 a.m. You can't be the CEO, the lead engineer, and the head of sales. The company is too big for that now. And you are not invincible. Reluctantly, I began to delegate, hiring a chief technology officer and a chief operating officer. Letting go of control was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but it was necessary. In the spring of my 5th year, I received an email from my academic advisor. Cora, it read, I've just reviewed your transcript. You have enough credits to graduate this June. With honors. I had been so focused on taking one class at a time, I hadn't realized I'd reached the finish line. The email continued, the commencement committee would also like to formally invite you to be the student commencement speaker. Your story is one we feel would be deeply inspiring to your fellow graduates. I was stunned. But the thought of writing a deeply personal speech while also navigating the complexities of a rapidly scaling company was overwhelming. I politely declined, citing the demands on my time. I would just graduate. That would be enough. I called my mother with the news. I'm finally graduating, Mom. In June. With honors. Her joyful gasp was everything. Oh, Cora. We'll all be there. Your father, too. He doesn't have to, I started. He's your father. Of course, he'll be there, she said, her tone leaving no room for debate. Just as graduation loomed, Lyra was at another crossroads. Our investment bankers and our board, led by Grace and Diana, were strongly advising an initial public offering. The market is hungry for high-growth tech stories with solid enterprise contracts, Grace explained in a late-night board meeting. Our metrics are perfect. The window is open right now. I believe we could command a valuation close to $1 billion. $1 billion. The number was abstract, almost meaningless. Are we ready? I asked, looking around the table at the team I had built. They all nodded. We were ready. The timing was almost poetic. The intense, secret process of preparing our S-1 filing with the SEC would overlap perfectly with my final exams and graduation. We filed confidentially, the news kept under tight wraps. The public announcement of our IPO pricing would happen on the morning of my graduation. I arranged for my family to stay at a luxurious hotel in Palo Alto, a small, silent statement of how far I'd come. The night before the ceremony, Grace called me, her voice buzzing with an energy that crackled through the phone. The bankers are seeing unprecedented institutional demand, she said. They're recommending we price the offering higher than we projected. Cora, we're looking at a potential billion-dollar valuation on day one. When will we know the final price? I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. The pricing committee meets at dawn. I should have the final number for you by 9:30 a.m. The press release will go out at 10. My graduation ceremony began at 10 a.m. As I hung up, a text from my mother came through. Landed safely. Can't wait to see you walk across that stage tomorrow. We are all so proud. I stared at the word all and wondered if, after all these years, it could possibly be true. The morning of my graduation was bathed in the kind of golden, crystalline light that only Northern California can produce. I woke at dawn, my mind a torrent of anxiety and anticipation. I checked my phone. Nothing from Grace yet. I showered and put on a simple navy blue dress to wear under my gown. My cap and gown, symbols of a finish line I had sometimes thought I'd never cross, hung on my door. 5 years. It had taken me 5 years of part-time classes, of studying on planes and in the backs of cars between meetings, but I had done it. At 7:30 a.m., my phone rang. It was Grace. The underwriters are recommending we price at $48 a share, she said, her voice steady but laced with excitement. I did the math in my head. That would put our initial market capitalization at just over $1 billion. A unicorn, she said, as if reading my mind. It's official, Cora. We're a unicorn. My hand was shaking. When is it locked in? The committee formalizes it at 9:30. The news will break right as you're walking in. Your phone will be on, right? It'll be on vibrate, I promised. At 8:30, I walked to campus to meet my family. The familiar pathways, shaded by oak and eucalyptus trees, felt both nostalgic and new. I saw them standing near the entrance to the main quad, my mother, elegant in a pale green dress, my brothers, Julian and Marcus, looking uncomfortable in suits, and my father. He stood tall and unsmiling, a monolith in a perfectly pressed gray suit, his posture a fortress. Cora. My mother rushed to me, her hug warm and fierce. We're so proud of you, darling. My brothers offered stiff, awkward hugs and congratulations. Then I stood before my father. He didn't hug me. He extended his hand, a formal, businesslike gesture. Congratulations on completing your degree, Cora, he said. Not I'm proud of you. Not even a smile. Just an acknowledgement of a task completed. Thank you for coming, I said, my voice even. Your mother wanted us all to be here, he replied. We made stilted small talk as other families swirled around us in joyful chaos. An announcement called for graduates to line up. I have to go, I said. The family seating is in section 12. I'll see you after. As I walked away to find my place in the procession, I heard my father say to my brothers, well, at least she has the degree. She'll have something to fall back on when this whole tech thing blows over. I found my spot among the other engineering graduates. I slipped my phone into a pocket I'd sewn into my dress. At 9:42 a.m., as we began the slow march into the amphitheater, my phone buzzed. A text from Grace. Price confirmed. $52 a share. Market cap $1.2 billion. Press release goes live in 15 minutes. Congratulations, Madam CEO. You did it. $1.2 billion. I felt a wave of dizziness. The girl from Astoria, Oregon, whose father thought computers were a hobby, had just founded a company valued at over $1 billion. We took our seats. The ceremony began. The speeches started. I barely heard a word. My phone began to vibrate almost continuously with texts from my team, my investors, my mentors. I ignored them all. Then, at 10:28 a.m., a single, separate buzz. A text from a number I knew by heart. My father. With trembling fingers, I opened it. Your mother tells me you have a lunch planned. Don't expect me to foot the bill for your celebration. You're on your own now. The words were a punch to the gut. On this day, at this exact moment, this was his message. Rejection. A final cutting of the cord he believed he held. Tears welled, hot and sharp, but I blinked them back with a fury I didn't know I possessed. I would not cry. Not for him. Moments later, a voice from the stage boomed over the speakers. Cora Sterling, Bachelor of Science in Computer Science and Engineering with honors. I stood up. My legs felt like they were made of sand. I walked across the stage, my mind a blank. The dean shook my hand. A photographer's flash went off. I smiled, a hollow gesture. As I stepped off the stage, my phone rang. Grace. I answered, my back to the stage, my voice a low whisper. Hello. Her voice was pure joy and loud. Cora. It's insane. The stock is already trading up in the pre-market. The IPO is a monster success. CNBC wants you for an interview this afternoon. Her voice carried. A few graduates and faculty members nearby turned to look. That's incredible news, Grace, I said, my own voice gaining strength, louder than I intended. $1 billion IPO. I can't believe it. More heads turned. A murmur started to ripple through the rows. We need to schedule a press conference. Grace boomed through the phone. As the CEO of a newly public, billion-dollar company, the market needs to hear from you. I understand, I said, now fully aware of the audience I had. I'll be at the office as soon as this ceremony is over. I hung up and looked out at the sea of faces. The whispers were spreading like wildfire. Billion-dollar IPO CEO, the words jumped from person to person. My gaze found section 12. I saw my mother's stunned face, my brother's gaping mouths. And I saw my father. He was staring at me, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. He held his phone in his hand, a news alert no doubt glowing on the screen. He had sent his dismissive text just minutes before the world told him his daughter, the one he had just cast off, was the CEO of a company worth more than Sterling and Sons Lumber could ever be. Our eyes locked across the vast expanse of the amphitheater. And for the first time in my 28 years, I saw the carefully constructed fortress of his certainty crumble. It wasn't pride. It wasn't love. But it was something I had never seen from him before. It was respect. The rest of the ceremony was a surreal haze. When we were finally dismissed, I was met by a small crowd of professors and classmates, all offering stunned congratulations. I made my way to the designated family meeting spot. My mother hugged me, tears in her eyes. $1 billion, Cora? Why didn't you tell us? I couldn't, Mom. SEC regulations. It was all confidential until this morning. My brothers flanked me, looking at me as if for the first time. My father stood apart, his face a complex mixture of emotions I couldn't begin to decipher. He finally stepped forward. This was a deliberate performance, wasn't it? He said, his voice low and strained. No, I said calmly. This was my graduation day. The timing of the IPO was determined by the market, not by me. But speaking of timing, I held up my phone, showing him his own message. You're on your own now. Your text arrived just as my name was being called. An interesting choice, Dad. My mother gasped. Arthur, you didn't. His face flushed a deep red. I was simply acknowledging her independence. No, I said, and the strength in my voice surprised even me. You were dismissing me. One last time. You've been waiting for me to fail since the day I left for Stanford. A small crowd had gathered, phones subtly raised. This was a story. The tech prodigy and her disapproving father. This isn't the place for this, he said stiffly. I agree, I replied. I have a private room reserved for lunch. We can talk there. At the restaurant, after the host had seated us with a starstruck congratulations on the IPO, MS. Sterling, and the door to our private room was closed, my father looked at me. So this is it. Your grand moment. This is a milestone, I corrected. One of many. It was built on 5 years of work you called a fantasy. I placed my diploma on the center of the table. And I did it while finishing the degree you were so sure I'd abandon. My mother put a hand on his arm. Arthur, can you not just be proud? He shook her off. Proud of what? A bubble built on investor hype? Let's see where this company is in 5 years. It was Julian who spoke. Dad, it's not a bubble. I looked them up. Lyra is the leader in their field. Their client list is a who's who of the energy sector. My father stared at him, betrayed. My phone rang. It was Grace. I stepped into a corner to take it. CNBC is confirmed for 3 p.m. A car is on its way to you now. I returned to the table. I'm sorry, but I have to leave. I have media interviews this afternoon. More important than your family, my father demanded. As important as the business that has always been your priority, I said evenly. Something inside me, a dam that had been holding back years of frustration, finally broke. But it wasn't a flood of anger. It was a calm, clear river of truth. My little computer program, as you've always called it, I began, my voice quiet but filling the room, just created over $1 billion of value. It employs 150 people who are building their lives on the vision I had. It is helping to secure the power grid of this country. I stood and gathered my purse. I did all this while you told me I would fail. While you groomed my brothers for your world and told me I didn't belong in mine. I didn't build Lyra to prove you wrong, Dad. I built it because I believed in it. I looked him straight in the eye. But your text today made one thing perfectly clear. I have been on my own for a long, long time. And look what I have built. The room was silent. My mother's eyes shone with tears. My brothers were speechless. My father opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time in his life, Arthur Sterling had no response. "I have to go," I said. I looked at my mother and brothers. "We can have dinner tomorrow night. You're welcome to tour the office." I didn't include my father in the invitation. As I turned to leave, he spoke my name. "Cora." I paused at the door. "Congratulations," he said, the word sounding foreign on his tongue. "On the IPO. It's substantial." It wasn't "I'm proud of you." It wasn't "I was wrong." But it was an acknowledgement of something undeniable. It was respect. "Thank you, Dad," I said. That might be the first time you've ever said something like that to me. Outside, a black car was waiting. Grace stood by the open door, beaming. As I slid inside, I glanced back. My father was standing on the curb, watching me go. I had thought this moment would feel like victory. Instead, it felt like freedom. Freedom from needing his approval. Freedom from the weight of his doubt. As the car pulled into traffic, heading toward my new future, I felt the last 5 years settle into place, not as a struggle against my father, but as a journey toward myself. My story isn't about the IPO or the money. It's about the quiet, often lonely, work of building a life that is authentically your own. It's about learning to be your own source of validation. Have you ever had to build your own path against the expectations of those you love? I'd genuinely love to hear your story in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, I hope you'll share it with someone who might need a reminder that their dreams are valid, even if no one else can see them yet. Thank you for walking this path with me for a little while. And remember, the most important foundation you can ever build is your own self-worth.